I've been reading a lot recently about Steve Jobs, and as a leader, as an innovator, as an entrepreneur, Jobs needs absolutely no introductions to anybody, and it's just a shame that his life ended so soon, really. But if you look at Jobs' history, I learned some really interesting facts about Steve. So Steve Jobs was 21 when he co-founded Apple. The Apple computer company. And by the age of 23, he was a multi-millionaire. And in 1981, Apple was taken public. And by 1983, the company had grown so much that it needed a tried and tested leader in place. And Steve Jobs and his partner in Apple actually appointed a guy called John Sculley, who was at the time the chief exec of Pepsi. So John Sculley came in, and by 1984, he and Jobs had this friction-based relationship. And actually, Jobs had then got himself into a position where he wasn't listening to Sculley. He'd started to isolate himself. And because Jobs was the personality, he had started to reject any feedback from his team. He was pushing his team really hard. And he had a number of complaints about his leadership style. And it got to the point where in 1985, Jobs and Sculley were so battling against each other so much that the board of Apple was asked to make a decision between the two of them. And the Apple board sided with Sculley against Jobs. So Jobs was effectively demoted. And later on that year, Jobs left Apple, the Apple Corporation. And he talks about it in biographies as being some of the darkest days of his life. But when you look at the root cause of the issue, it was because Jobs didn't have that ability to be self-aware and didn't reflect on his own leadership style and the impact that style had on the organization and the people around him. So the rest is also quite interesting, because Jobs then went on to form another computer company called Next. He also went on to form Pixar, and by 1996, Apple acquired Next, and Jobs was back into the Apple organization. And within a year, Jobs was then appointed as CEO of Apple. And he talks about in previous biographies that being a really difficult period for him, but one where he learned a lot about himself. And he is quoted as having said that he left Apple as a manager, and when he returned through the acquisition with Next, he had worked on his leadership skills and his ability to engage the organization and returned as a leader. So I tell you this story because it's someone who's in the public eye, someone who has been incredibly successful but had a real fall from grace. And Steve Jobs himself accounted that, or apportioned responsibility to himself for that fall from grace, and recognized that if he had been able to be more self-aware, look at his own leadership capability and understand where he might need development as a leader, then actually none of that pain may have happened. So I work with leaders on a regular basis, and one of the places we start is assessment. How do you assess your skills and capability as a leader so that you can inform your own self-awareness and therefore start to develop the skills and traits of highly effective leadership? And they have to be skills, traits, behaviors, and capability that is proven. And how do you prove leadership capability? Well, there are models and assessments out there that will enable you to do just that. And when you work with an executive coach, and coaching is primarily what we do in our Focus for Growth business, one of the starting points for our relationship with clients is that assessment. How do we help you as a leader to get a really clear assessment of where you are, benchmark you against what we know to be outstanding leadership traits, and then work on a really solid personal development plan that's going to help you strengthen your leadership. And that strengthening in your leadership will inevitably have a knock-on effect on your organization, on the teams that work for you, on the leaders that work alongside you, on the entire organization, so that the people in your organization become more committed, more engaged, and start to see the future for the organization through their eyes and through the eyes of the leader. I'd be delighted to talk to you about how we can help you to gain that assessment, start to think about where your skills as a leader can be assessed and then improved, and work on what is a pretty robust series and sequence of coaching to strengthen your leadership and strengthen your organization so that you can grow your people in order to grow the business. I hope that's been a useful story around a successful proven leader like somebody like Steve Jobs. And I hope you can see that actually even someone as strong as Steve Jobs, who had such a powerfully positive track record, actually saw the value in that self-reflection, self-awareness, development of his own style in order to improve his capability within the business. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and I'd love to connect with you and speak to you about opportunities to work together. Please do either look us up on the YouTube channel that we've just launched or connect with me on LinkedIn. I have a Facebook community as well, and if you want to make contact with me, please feel free. I'd be delighted to have a conversation with you. I look forward to seeing you on the next video from the Leadership Success Series from Focus for Growth.